400 guests, 17 cameras, every power broker in Chicago watching, and in the center of that ballroom, a pregnant woman in an emerald dress stood completely alone while red wine dripped down her chest and a handprint burned across her face. Her husband was 5 feet away. He saw the whole thing. The wine, the slap, his pregnant wife stumbling backward with one hand on her belly and the other on her cheek. And he laughed. He laughed because he thought she was nobody, a small-town nurse from Kentucky who had served her purpose and could now be discarded like a used napkin at a charity dinner. His mistress laughed too. So did his mother. 3 people, standing in a circle of cruelty, convinced they were untouchable. But here's what none of them knew. Here's what makes this story unlike anything you have heard before. The pregnant woman they had just humiliated, the woman covered in wine, the woman whose face was still stinging from a slap delivered in front of 400 witnesses, that woman owned the entire company. Every floor, every contract, every promotion, every paycheck, including theirs. She owned 54% of a $40 billion corporation, and she had been watching them from the shadows for over a year, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. They gave her that moment. They just did not know it yet. This is the story of Evelyn Carter, a woman who lost everything: her marriage, her home, her dignity, her health, nearly her baby, and then rebuilt it all with the one thing no one could take from her: the truth about who she really was. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, 3 people will lose everything they thought they earned. And the woman they called nobody will be sitting in the corner office on the 42nd floor, signing checks with their names on the termination line. It starts with a sandwich, a turkey and avocado sandwich, and a lie that lasted 3 years. Story value and lesson before we begin. Here's why this story matters. This is not just entertainment. This is a mirror. If you have ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love you, if you have ever been told you were crazy for seeing what was right in front of your eyes, if you have ever stayed silent while someone took credit for your strength, then this story was written for you. The lesson is simple. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. And the people who underestimate you are writing their own ending. They just do not know it yet. Now. Chapter 1. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or hopeful or reminded you of someone who needs to hear it, do something small that makes a big difference. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. Leave a comment and tell me, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it the slap, the laugh, the grandmother's letter? Or was it something else, something personal that only you would understand? Share this video with one person who needs to hear that their story is not over. And tap that like button, because every like tells us to keep creating stories that matter. Thank you for staying until the end. That tells me everything I need to know about you. You are the kind of person who cares. And this channel was built for people exactly like you. At the Apex Meridian Foundation Charity Gala, in front of 400 guests, 17 cameras, and every power broker in Chicago, a woman named Sabrina Vale slapped a pregnant woman across the face. The pregnant woman's name was Evelyn Carter. She was 7 months along. She was wearing an emerald dress that had taken her 3 weeks to save for. And the man standing 5 feet away, the man who watched the slap happen and then laughed like someone had told him a joke at a dinner party, that man was her husband. His name was Nathan Cole, Vice President of Strategy at Meridian Holdings, the company he bragged about at every cocktail party as if he had built it with his bare hands. Nathan did not build Meridian Holdings. He did not even understand who owned it. And in exactly 47 seconds, when a screen behind the stage flickered to life and a name appeared that no one in that ballroom expected, Nathan Cole, Sabrina Vale, and Nathan's mother, Diane, would begin to understand that the pregnant woman they had just humiliated was the single most powerful person in the building. But that moment had not arrived yet. And to understand how Evelyn Carter ended up standing in a ballroom with wine dripping down her dress and a handprint burning across her cheek, we need to go back 6 months, to a Tuesday morning, to a kitchen that smelled like scrambled eggs and quiet desperation. 6 months before the gala, Evelyn stood in the kitchen of their downtown Chicago apartment making breakfast. She was 4 months pregnant. Nathan sat at the counter scrolling his phone with one hand and ignoring her with the other. She had made his eggs the way he liked them. Over medium, toast cut diagonally, coffee black with half a sugar. She had been making this breakfast for 3 years, ever since they got married. Back when Nathan was a mid-level manager with big dreams and Evelyn was a pediatric nurse who believed in every single one of them. Back then, he used to kiss her forehead every morning and say, "You are my good luck charm, Evelyn." Back then, he used to mean it. Evelyn set the plate in front of him. Nathan did not look up. She said, "My appointment is at 2. The ultrasound. You said you would come." Nathan exhaled through his nose. He said, "I have a meeting with the Hargrove Group at 1:30. It might run long." Evelyn said, "You missed the last one too." Nathan finally looked at her, not with warmth, with the specific kind of irritation reserved for people who remind you of obligations you have already decided to ignore. He said, "Evelyn, I am trying to become the youngest CEO in this company's history. I cannot pause my career every time there is an appointment." She did not argue. She had stopped arguing 3 months ago, around the same time she noticed the long blonde hair on his jacket collar. Around the same time, his phone started buzzing at 11 at night with messages he answered in the bathroom with the door closed. She cleared his plate after he left without touching the toast. She washed the mug he had not thanked her for, and then she sat at the kitchen table with both hands on her belly and tried to remember the last time her husband had looked at her like she mattered. At 11:15 that morning, her phone rang. The caller ID said Shaw and Associates. She almost did not answer. She assumed it was about her grandmother's estate. Ruth Carter had passed away 3 months earlier in the small Kentucky town where she had raised Evelyn after Evelyn's parents died in a car accident when she was 6. Evelyn answered. A man's voice said, "Mrs. Cole, my name is Leonard Shaw. I was your grandmother Ruth's attorney for 40 years. I need to meet with you, today if possible. It concerns an inheritance matter that is significantly more complex than you were told." Evelyn said, "I already received the house and the savings account. Is there something else?" Leonard paused. Then he said, "Mrs. Cole, your grandmother owned a 54% controlling stake in Meridian Holdings, the company where your husband works. She built it, she hid it, and she left every share to you." Evelyn sat down on the couch because her knees stopped working. She said, "That is not possible." Leonard said, "I have spent 40 years making sure it was. Can you meet me at 3 o'clock? And Mrs. Cole, do not tell your husband. Do not tell anyone. I will explain everything when you arrive." At 3:15 that afternoon, Evelyn sat across from Leonard Shaw in a small law office in Lincoln Park. Leonard was 67 years old, silver-haired, precise in every movement, the kind of man who wore a pocket square not for fashion, but because preparation was a philosophy. He laid a folder in front of her. Inside were trust documents, corporate filings, share certificates, and a handwritten letter from her grandmother that Leonard said she should read later when she was alone. Leonard explained. Ruth Carter, born Ruth Harper, had co-founded Meridian Holdings in 1978 with a partner who handled the public side while Ruth handled operations. When the partner retired in 1990, Ruth bought his shares and restructured everything into a blind trust. She wanted the company run by professionals. She did not want the attention. She lived in Kentucky. She drove a 12-year-old pickup truck. She made pie for church fundraisers, and she quietly controlled a $40 billion corporation. Evelyn said, "Why did she never tell me?" Leonard's expression softened. He said, "Because she wanted you to become strong on your own. Not because of money, because of character." He continued, "The trust has a mandatory disclosure clause. In 6 months, Evelyn would be formally installed as chairwoman. But Ruth had wanted her granddaughter to have time to learn the business first. Leonard would mentor her, secretly." Evelyn looked down at the folder. She said, "My husband works at Meridian. He is a vice president. He is trying to become CEO." Leonard nodded. He said, "I know. Your grandmother knew too." That is precisely why she structured the trust the way she did. Nathan Cole was fast-tracked at Meridian as a professional courtesy to the trust beneficiary. He does not know that. He believes he earned it. Evelyn closed the folder. She looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, all that glass and steel and ambition, and she thought about the man who could not be bothered to attend an ultrasound for his own child. She said, "When do we start?" Leonard almost smiled. He said, "We already have." That evening, Evelyn came home to an empty apartment. Nathan had texted that he was working late. She heated leftover soup. She ate alone. She opened her grandmother's letter and read it at the kitchen table with tears running down her face. The letter said, "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, I am gone and you have learned the truth. I never told you because I wanted you to become strong on your own. Not because of money, but because of character. You have more courage in your little finger than most people find in a lifetime. The company is yours, not because of blood, but because you are the only person I trust to lead with kindness. Do not let anyone make you small, and if they try, show them exactly who raised you." Evelyn folded the letter carefully. She placed it inside her journal. Then she picked up her phone and called her best friend Maggie Torres. Maggie answered on the first ring. She said, "What is wrong? You have your serious voice on." Evelyn said, "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to scream." Maggie said, "I am not promising that. What happened?" Evelyn told her about Nathan, the blonde hair, the late nights, the missed appointments. She did not tell her about the inheritance. Not yet. One earthquake at a time. Maggie was quiet for 3 full seconds, which was a record. Then she said, "Okay, listen to me. When someone starts making you feel crazy for asking normal questions, that is not you being paranoid. That is gaslighting. Write down what you see. Dates, times, trust your gut. And if I find out who this blonde is, I am going to need bail money." Evelyn laughed for the first time in weeks. She said, "I love you, Maggie." Maggie said, obviously, "Now eat something. That baby needs calories, not cortisol." Over the next 2 months, Evelyn lived 2 lives. In the mornings, she was the quiet, pregnant wife who made breakfast and asked no questions. In the afternoons, she was in Leonard's office, studying corporate bylaws, reading board minutes, and learning to speak the language of a world her grandmother had built from nothing. It was overwhelming. Some days she stared at financial statements until the numbers blurred and she had to put her head down on the desk. Leonard would set a glass of water beside her and say, "Your grandmother once told me she learned accounting from a library book and a stolen calculator. You're doing fine." Meanwhile, Nathan grew bolder. He stopped pretending. He came home at midnight, smelling like expensive perfume. He took phone calls in the hallway and came back smiling. He started going to the gym 4 times a week, not for health, but for the kind of vanity that arrives when a man wants to impress someone new. Evelyn documented everything: dates, times, receipts she found in pockets, a restaurant bill for two at a place she had never been. She kept it all in a journal under her side of the mattress, exactly as Maggie had advised. One Thursday afternoon, Diane Cole came for lunch. Nathan's mother arrived in a cashmere coat and a mood designed for destruction. Diane was 61 years old, carried herself like minor royalty, and had spent 3 years treating Evelyn with the kind of surgical contempt that left no fingerprints. She looked at the apartment and said, "It is cozy in here." She meant small. She looked at the food and said, "Oh, how simple." She meant cheap. She looked at Evelyn's pregnant belly and said, "You are carrying so heavy, dear. Some women just expand in every direction." She meant ugly. Then she set down her fork and said, "Nathan needs a partner who can keep up with his world. Not everyone is built for it. I say this with love, Evelyn. You should think about what is best for him." Evelyn held her composure until Diane left. Then she sat at the kitchen table and pressed her palms against her eyes so hard she saw white. 20 minutes later, Maggie arrived with takeout and fury. Evelyn told her what Diane had said. Maggie set down the containers with more force than necessary. She said, "That woman is so full of passive aggression, she could invade a country and still say bless your heart while doing it. You know what she is doing, right? She is conditioning you to leave on your own, so Nathan does not have to be the bad guy." Evelyn said, "Maybe she is right. Maybe I am not built for his world." Maggie pointed a chopstick at her. She said, "You are literally the secret owner of the company he works at. You are not just built for his world. You are the architect. He just does not know it yet." 2 weeks later, Evelyn decided to surprise Nathan at work with lunch. She packed his favorite sandwich, turkey and avocado on sourdough, and drove downtown. She parked across the street from the Meridian building and waited for him to come out for his usual afternoon coffee. At 12:45, the glass doors opened. Nathan walked out. Beside him was a woman Evelyn had never seen before. Tall, blonde, silver dress, perfect posture. She walked like someone who expected the sidewalk to feel grateful. Nathan's hand was on the small of her back. The woman leaned in close and whispered something. Nathan laughed, the real laugh, the one Evelyn had not heard, directed at her in over a year. Then the woman turned her face and kissed him. Not a quick peck, not an accident, a kiss that said this was not new. Evelyn sat in her car, holding a brown paper bag with his favorite sandwich, and watched her marriage officially end through a windshield. She did not scream. She did not call him. She did not get out of the car. She locked the doors, gripped the steering wheel, and came apart in the parking space like a building collapsing inward. Silent from the outside, but devastated in every room. 20 minutes later, she called Leonard. Her voice was steady in a way that scared her. She said, "I need to move faster. Who is the woman with Nathan?" Leonard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Her name is Sabrina Vale. She is a PR consultant contracted by Meridian. She has been on the account for 8 months. Evelyn said, 8 months. Our anniversary was 9 months ago." Leonard did not respond to that. He said, "I will accelerate the timeline. We will approach the board chair next week." Evelyn hung up. She looked at the brown paper bag on the passenger seat. She thought about throwing it away. Instead, she folded it flat, drove home, and put it inside her journal as a bookmark. A reminder of the exact moment she stopped waiting for Nathan Cole to remember who she was. Over the next 3 weeks, Leonard introduced Evelyn to the board chair, a woman named Marjorie Kent. Marjorie was a former federal judge with steel gray hair and a handshake that made grown men nervous. She reviewed the trust documents for 2 hours without speaking. Then she looked at Evelyn and said, "Your grandmother was the most disciplined person I ever encountered. I see where you get it." Marjorie agreed to support Evelyn's early installation as chairwoman. But the bylaws required a full board vote, and the earliest they could schedule, it was 2 weeks out. Until then, everything had to stay quiet. Evelyn agreed. She went home, she made dinner, she waited for Nathan, who did not arrive until 11. She said nothing, she smiled, she kissed his cheek, and she counted the days. The Apex Meridian Foundation. Charity Gala was the social event of Chicago's corporate calendar. 400 guests, black tie, crystal chandeliers scattering white light over polished marble floors, a string quartet near the stage, pretending elegance could keep ambition civilized. Evelyn arrived alone at 7:10 in the evening. She was 7 months pregnant now, wearing an emerald green gown she had found at a consignment shop and altered herself. She stood near a column wrapped in white orchids and watched the room fill with people who had no idea who she was. She was here for 2 reasons. First, to observe the board members she would soon oversee. Second, because some stubborn, foolish part of her still hoped that Nathan might look at her tonight the way he used to, that seeing her here, dressed up, carrying his child, might remind him of something worth saving. That hope lasted exactly 13 minutes. At 7:23, Nathan entered the ballroom. The shift in energy was immediate. He moved through the room like a man who had rehearsed importance in front of mirrors. Navy tuxedo, curated smile. And on his arm, shimmering in a silver dress, cut for maximum impact, was Sabrina Vale. Sabrina walked like she was being photographed with every step. 3 vice presidents broke off conversations to greet Nathan. 2 investors turned. A lifestyle editor lifted her phone. Sabrina absorbed the attention like oxygen. Nathan spotted Evelyn and crossed the room with Sabrina still attached to his arm. He said, "Evelyn, I did not expect you this early." His voice was warm enough for nearby ears to mistake as affection, but Evelyn heard what he actually meant. "I did not want you here at all." Sabrina tilted her head and looked Evelyn up and down, starting at the shoes, ending at the belly. She said, "You must be the wife. I have heard so much." Before Evelyn could respond, Nathan steered Sabrina away. "Come meet the Mercer Group," he said. To Evelyn, without turning back, he added, "Try to stay comfortable. It is a long night." The dismissal was subtle. The room understood it anyway. At 7:40, Diane Cole arrived. Black velvet dress, diamonds heavy enough to announce themselves before she spoke. She kissed Nathan's cheek, embraced Sabrina like a daughter-in-law, and gave Evelyn a glance sharpened by years of practice. Diane said, "Still here?" "I assumed crowds would be difficult for you in your condition," Evelyn said. "I am fine, Diane." Diane accepted champagne from a passing server and said, "You always say that right before you create a scene." At 8:03, the real scene began. Sabrina crossed the floor with the confidence of someone who believed cruelty was a social skill. She stopped directly in front of Evelyn, close enough that her perfume erased the oxygen. She said, "I should thank you. You made this easy. Men like Nathan do not want limitations." Her eyes dropped to Evelyn's belly. Evelyn kept her voice even. She said, "Step back, Sabrina." Sabrina laughed softly. "Or what?" Nathan appeared beside them. His tone suggested Evelyn was the source of any tension. He said, "What is going on?" Sabrina said, "Your wife is being territorial." In public. Nathan exhaled with amusement. He said, Evelyn, please, not tonight, not tonight, as if betrayal had office hours. Diane materialized at Nathan's shoulder. She took in the scene and decided escalation was entertainment. She said, "This is exactly what I warned you about. A man trying to rise cannot carry dead weight forever." She said it loud enough for 3 tables to hear. Evelyn felt her pulse throb behind her eyes. She said, "You should stop talking." Diane's expression brightened with malice. She lifted her glass of red wine and said, "Or what?" Then she moved. One clean arc. Wrist turning, crimson liquid flying. Red wine hit Evelyn from shoulder to waist, blooming across her emerald dress like a wound opening. Gasps cracked through the crowd. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" And then Sabrina stepped forward and slapped Evelyn across the face. The sound was sharp, undeniable, not dramatic, worse, real. Evelyn's head snapped to the side. One hand flew to her burning cheek. The other locked protectively over her belly. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. 400 people stared. And Nathan Cole looked at his pregnant wife, wine-soaked and struck, and he laughed. One short laugh. The kind that says, "This is amusing to me." The kind that erases 3 years of marriage in a single breath. That laugh was the point of no return. Evelyn looked at Nathan, then at Sabrina, then at Diane. 3 people who had just destroyed their own lives and did not know it yet. She turned and walked out of the ballroom alone. No one helped her, no security intervened, no guest stepped forward. She walked through 400 people and not one of them moved. She made it to the parking garage before her body failed her. The pain started as a cramp, then it became a wave, then it became everything. She collapsed against the concrete wall beside her car, one hand on her belly, the other reaching for her phone. She dialed 911 from the parking garage floor. She said, "I am 7 months pregnant and I am bleeding. Please hurry." The ambulance arrived in 9 minutes. It felt like 9 hours. The emergency room at Northwestern Memorial was bright and loud and moving at a speed that made the rest of the world feel like it had stopped. Evelyn lay on a gurney, while nurses attached monitors, and Dr. Rachel Bennett appeared at her side with the calm urgency of someone who had done this 1,000 times but never stopped caring. Dr. Bennett said, "Evelyn, your blood pressure is dangerously high. You are showing signs of preeclampsia. We have stabilized the bleeding, but I need you to understand something. The stress you are under is directly threatening this pregnancy." Evelyn stared at the ceiling. She said, "Is my baby okay?" Dr. Bennett placed a hand on her arm. She said, "Right now, yes, but preeclampsia can be life-threatening. I want you to know the warning signs. Severe headaches, vision changes, upper abdominal pain, sudden swelling in your face or hands. If you experience any of these, you come back immediately. You do not wait. You do not let anyone tell you that you are overreacting. Do you understand?" Evelyn nodded. Dr. Bennett said, "I also need to ask, what happened tonight?" Evelyn closed her eyes. She said, "My mother-in-law threw wine on me. My husband's girlfriend slapped me. My husband laughed. I left. Dr. Bennett was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 'Are you safe at home?' Evelyn opened her eyes. She said, 'I do not know.' That honest answer hung in the room like a held breath. At 10:45 that night, while Evelyn was still in the hospital with an IV in her arm and monitors tracking her baby's heartbeat, a process server walked into her room. He was young, visibly uncomfortable, and holding a manila envelope. He said, "Miss Cole?" Evelyn said, "Yes." He placed the envelope on her bedside table. He said, "You have been served. I am sorry." Then he left. Inside the envelope were 2 documents. The first was a divorce filing. Nathan Cole versus Evelyn Cole. Irreconcilable differences. The second was worse. An emergency custody motion. Nathan was requesting sole custody of their unborn child on the grounds that Evelyn was, in the language of his attorney, mentally unstable, prone to public disruptions, and unable to provide a safe environment for a child. Attached was a sworn affidavit from Diane Cole. It said, "I have personally witnessed Evelyn's erratic behavior over the past 3 years. She is paranoid, emotionally volatile, and has repeatedly created scenes at family gatherings. I fear for the well-being of my grandchild." Evelyn read the affidavit twice. She read it a third time to make sure the words were real. Then she set it on her lap and placed both hands on her belly and stared at the hospital wall until the tears came. Not the quiet kind, the kind that comes from a place so deep it does not have a name, the kind that shakes your whole body because the grief is too big for just your eyes. A nurse came in. She dimmed the lights. She adjusted the blanket. She did not ask questions because some pain does not need to be explained. At 11:30, Evelyn called Leonard Shaw. He answered on the first ring despite the hour. She told him everything: the gala, the slap, the wine, Nathan's laugh, the collapse, the hospital, the divorce filing, the custody motion. Leonard listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "Evelyn, I know this feels like the end. It is not. We accelerate everything. I will contact Marjorie Kent tonight. We approach the full board this week, and I am retaining a family attorney named Monica Hale, who will dismantle that custody motion before Nathan's lawyer finishes his morning coffee." Evelyn said, "Leonard, what if it is not enough? What if they take my baby?" Leonard's voice did not waver. He said, "They will not. Your grandmother did not build a $40 billion shield around you for it to fail when you need it most." Evelyn wiped her eyes. She said, "Okay. Okay." She hung up. She looked at the monitor, showing her baby's heartbeat, that tiny steady rhythm that was the only thing in the world that had not betrayed her. She whispered, "Hold on. I am going to fix this. I promise." The next morning, things moved fast. Leonard contacted Marjorie Kent, who reviewed the gala footage that was already circulating on social media. Marjorie called an emergency board consultation. Within 48 hours, 5 of 7 board members had been briefed on Evelyn's identity. Meanwhile, Monica Hale, Evelyn's new family attorney, filed a response to Nathan's custody motion that was so thorough it read like a criminal indictment. She attached the gala footage. She attached Nathan's affair evidence. She attached financial records showing Nathan had been using company funds for personal dinners with Sabrina. She filed a counter motion for a protective order. At the preliminary hearing, the judge watched 3 minutes of footage, read Diane's affidavit, compared it to the video evidence, and said, "I find this affidavit to be inconsistent with documented reality. Emergency custody motion denied. And counsel, you may want to advise your client's mother about the legal consequences of filing false statements with this court." Nathan's attorney turned pale. Nathan, sitting behind him, stared at the table. Evelyn won. For a moment, she won. The next 10 days felt like breathing after being underwater. Evelyn moved into a small apartment Maggie helped her find. She continued her sessions with Leonard. She ate regular meals. She slept more than 4 hours. Her blood pressure stabilized. Dr. Bennett said, "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." Maggie came over with sparkling cider and grocery store cupcakes. She said, "We are winning, baby." That judge saw right through Nathan's nonsense. His lawyer looked like he swallowed a wasp. Evelyn allowed herself to feel hope. The board vote was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Leonard had secured enough proxies. Marjorie was prepared to chair the session. In 6 days, Evelyn would walk into that boardroom and become the chairwoman of Meridian Holdings. In 6 days, everything Nathan had taken from her would become irrelevant. On Saturday morning, 2 days before the vote, Evelyn arrived at Leonard's office for their final preparation session. She brought his favorite tea, Earl Grey with a splash of milk, and the annotated board packet she had been studying all week. She knocked on the conference room door. No answer. She opened it. Leonard was on the floor. His face was gray. His left hand was clenched. His right arm was twisted at an angle that did not look voluntary. The teacup he had been holding was shattered beside him, brown liquid pooling across legal documents that represented 40 years of work. Evelyn dropped everything and called 911 for the second time in 3 weeks. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. "Massive stroke," one of them said into his radio. "Altered consciousness, left side paralysis. We are transporting now." At the hospital, a neurologist told Evelyn that Leonard was being placed in a medically induced coma. The damage was significant, recovery was uncertain, timeline unknown. Evelyn stood in the hospital corridor and felt the floor disappear beneath her. Leonard was the only person with complete trust documentation. He was the only person with legal authority to authenticate Evelyn's claim before the board. Without him conscious and testifying, the vote could not proceed. She called Marjorie. Marjorie's voice was heavy with regret. She said, "Evelyn, I believe you. Every board member who has been briefed believes you. But without Leonard or certified documentation, I cannot legally call the vote. The bylaws are clear. We need the trust executor's testimony or a certified authentication from the trust's custodial bank." Leonard handled everything personally. Finding the backup documentation could take weeks, maybe months. Evelyn leaned against the hospital wall. She said, "So it is over." Marjorie said, "It is not over. It is delayed. There is a difference." That word again, delayed, as if delay was not just another word for drowning slowly. Evelyn drove to her apartment. She sat on the floor surrounded by boxes she had not finished unpacking. She called Maggie, who was working a double shift and could not come. She thought about Nathan, about Sabrina, about Diane, about the judge who had denied the custody motion, knowing Nathan's lawyers would simply file another one. About Leonard on the hospital floor with 40 years of loyalty leaking out of his brain. She placed both hands on her belly and said to no one, "I had everything in my hands and it all disappeared." 2 days later, Nathan invited Sabrina to move into the apartment, their apartment, the one Evelyn had decorated, the nursery she had painted soft yellow with tiny white stars on the ceiling. Evelyn came to collect her remaining things. She used her key, which still worked because Nathan had not bothered to change the locks. He probably assumed she would never come back. She opened the door and found Sabrina sitting on the living room couch, wearing Evelyn's bathrobe, drinking from Evelyn's favorite mug, the one Maggie had given her that said, "World's okayest nurse." Sitting in the rocking chair Evelyn had bought for the nursery. Sabrina looked up and smiled. She said, "Oh, he said you would be coming. Your boxes are by the door." Evelyn looked at her things, packed into cardboard boxes and stacked by the entrance like trash waiting for pickup. 3 years of her life reduced to 4 boxes, and a dismissal from the woman who had slapped her in front of 400 people. She picked up the boxes. She did not speak. She did not cry. She carried them to her car, one trip at a time, while Sabrina watched from the window and sipped tea from Evelyn's mug. Maggie came that evening. They sat on the studio floor eating Thai food from containers. Maggie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It did not disappear, Evelyn. It got delayed. And that baby in your belly is not a delay. That baby is your reason to keep standing." Evelyn leaned her head against Maggie's shoulder. She said, "I am so tired." Maggie said, "I know, but tired is not done. and you are not done. The weeks that followed were the worst of Evelyn's life, not because of one single blow, but because of the slow, methodical destruction of everything she thought she could count on. Nathan launched a campaign, not publicly, not with press releases or social media posts. Worse, he did it quietly, in conversations at dinner parties and coffee shops and office corridors. The kind of whisper campaign that destroys a person's reputation without leaving fingerprints. He told colleagues that Evelyn had suffered a mental breakdown. He told mutual friends that she had become paranoid and delusional during the pregnancy. He told her former coworkers at the hospital that she had been making wild accusations and that he was deeply concerned for her well-being. He cried when he said it. He was very convincing. One by one, Evelyn's phone stopped ringing. 2 nurses she had worked with for years sent texts that said, "We think you need help, Evelyn." A couple they used to have dinner with stopped responding entirely. A neighbor who used to wave in the hallway now looked away. The isolation was surgical. And it was working. Here is something most people do not know about abuse. The hitting part, the dramatic part, that is not what breaks you. What breaks you is the moment you realize that the person who hurt you has convinced everyone else that you deserved it. That is called DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. Abusers do this. It is a pattern, not a personality. And if you are listening to this and someone in your life is telling everyone that you are the problem after they hurt you, write this down. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. You are not crazy. They are counting on you, believing that you are. By her 8th month, Evelyn had exactly 2 people left. Maggie, who drove 3 hours round trip twice a week to check on her, and Dr. Bennett, who was monitoring her pregnancy with increasing concern. At her 34-week checkup, Dr. Bennett sat Evelyn down and spoke without her usual gentle filter. She said, "Your blood pressure is climbing again. Your protein levels are elevated. This is progressing. If we cannot stabilize you in the next 2 weeks, I may need to deliver this baby early." Evelyn said, "How early?" Dr. Bennett said, 34 to 36 weeks. The baby would likely be fine, but would need NICU time. What I need you to understand is that this is a direct result of chronic stress. Your body is telling you something. Are you listening? Evelyn was listening. She just did not know what to do with what she heard. 4 days later, at 2 in the morning, she woke up with a headache so severe it felt like her skull was being split open from the inside. Her vision blurred. Her hands were swollen. She recognized the symptoms because Dr. Bennett had made her memorize them. She called 911 for the 3rd time in 2 months. She said, "I am 35 weeks pregnant, and I think I am having a preeclampsia crisis." The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. At the hospital, Dr. Bennett met her in the emergency room. The numbers were bad. Blood pressure 210 over 115. Protein levels critical. The baby's heart rate was dipping. "Doctor," Bennett said, "Evelyn, if we cannot get this under control in the next 12 hours, we are doing an emergency delivery. I need you to understand that." Evelyn was alone. Maggie was 3 hours away, already in her car, already driving 90 miles an hour and praying. Leonard was in a coma. Nathan did not know and would not have cared. She lay in the hospital bed with monitors beeping and nurses moving and her hands on her belly. Talking to her daughter, in a whisper, she said, "Please hold on. I cannot lose you too. You are all I have left. Please." The hours passed like years. Maggie arrived at 4:30 in the morning, still in scrubs from her shift. Mascara smeared, out of breath. She sat beside Evelyn's bed and took her hand and did not make a single joke. She just sat there, being the friend that everyone deserves and almost no one gets. At 6:15 in the morning, Dr. Bennett returned with test results. She said, "Blood pressure is coming down. Baby's heart rate stabilized. We are not out of the woods, but we are stepping back from the cliff." Evelyn exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Dr. Bennett said, "You are on strict bed rest. No stress, no travel, no exceptions. I am not asking, I am telling you." Evelyn nodded. She looked at Maggie. Maggie squeezed her hand and said, "I am staying. Do not argue with me. I already called the hospital. They owe me 14 vacation days, and I am taking all of them right now." For the next 2 weeks, Maggie slept on Evelyn's couch and made terrible soup and watched reality television at volumes that Evelyn found medically concerning. And somewhere in that small studio apartment, between the bad soup and the loud television and the fear and the exhaustion, Evelyn Carter hit rock bottom. Not with a crash, with a settling, like sediment reaching the floor of a river. Everything hurt. Everything was lost. Everything was quiet. But she was still here, and the baby was still here, and that had to be enough. 3 days before Evelyn's due date, Nathan showed up at her apartment. He looked different, thinner, tired. His tie was crooked, which was something the old Nathan would never have allowed. He stood in the doorway holding a bouquet of white tulips, which were her favorite, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the man she had married. He said, "Can I come in?" Maggie, who was in the kitchen heating soup, appeared in the hallway like a guard dog that had smelled something wrong. She said, "Absolutely not." Evelyn said, "Maggie, give us a minute." Maggie stared at Nathan with the kind of hostility usually reserved for war criminals and people who talk during movies. Then she went to the bedroom and closed the door loudly enough to be a statement. Nathan sat on the couch. He looked at the studio apartment, at the boxes, at the bare walls, at the life his wife had been reduced to. Something crossed his face. Evelyn wanted to believe it was shame, he said. "I ended things with Sabrina." Evelyn said nothing. He said, "I know that does not fix anything. I know what I did at the gala was unforgivable. I have been lying to myself for months, telling myself that ambition justified everything. But I looked in the mirror last week, and I did not recognize the man staring back." He paused. His eyes were wet. He said, "I forgot who I married. You were always the best part of me, and I threw that away. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking for a chance, for the baby. Come home." Evelyn looked at him. She searched his face for the lie. She had become an expert at detecting lies over the past 6 months. She could spot misdirection from across a room. She could hear the hollow note in a voice that was performing sincerity instead of feeling it. But Nathan was crying, and he was saying the words she had wanted to hear for a year. And she was exhausted and terrified and about to have a baby, and completely, devastatingly alone. She said, "I need to think about it." Nathan nodded. He left the tulips on the table. He said, "I will wait as long as you need." After he left, Maggie came out of the bedroom. She said, "No." Evelyn said, "He seemed sincere." Maggie said, "Ted Bundy seemed sincere. That was literally his whole thing." Evelyn said, "Maggie." Maggie sat down across from her. Her voice shifted from sarcasm to something raw. She said, "Evelyn, listen to me. I have watched you get broken piece by piece for 6 months. I have held your hand in emergency rooms. I have slept on your terrible couch and eaten your terrible soup because I love you and I was scared you might not make it. Do not go back to the man who laughed when someone hit you. Please." Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if it is different this time?" Maggie said, "It is never different. It is just quieter." But Evelyn went back. She dropped the divorce proceedings. She moved back into the apartment, where Sabrina's perfume still lingered in the closets, and the nursery had been converted into a home office, and then hastily reconverted back. Nathan was attentive. He went to the doctor's appointment. He held her hand. He cooked dinner badly and burned the garlic, and they laughed about it. And for 3 days, Evelyn let herself pretend. She did not know what Maggie found out on the 4th day. Maggie, who never trusted Nathan's return, had done something bold. During a visit to the apartment, when Nathan thought she was in the bathroom, she left her phone recording on the kitchen counter. Nathan was alone with Diane, who had come over to discuss what she called the plan. The recording captured everything. Nathan said, "She is buying it. Once the baby comes and the dust settles, I will have the apartment, the custody advantage, and whatever this trust thing is." Diane said, "Good boy. Your lawyer says if you are married to her, when whatever corporate nonsense she is involved in activates, you may have marital property rights. Stay married, stay charming. We will sort the rest later." Nathan said, "How long do I have to keep this up?" Diane said. "As long as it takes. Smile, play husband, and for God's sake, learn to cook something." That burned garlic was embarrassing. Maggie brought the recording to Evelyn that evening. She played it on her phone without introduction or commentary. She just pressed play and let Nathan's voice fill the room. Evelyn listened to the whole thing. Then she listened to it again. Then she set the phone down on the table with the same careful precision she used when she was trying very hard not to break something. Maggie said, "I am sorry." Evelyn looked at her. Something had changed in her eyes. The grief was still there. The exhaustion was still there. But underneath both, something harder had arrived. Something that looked like the bedrock that remains after everything soft has been stripped away. She said, "Call Leonard's office. Find out if there is a backup. Find the vault. Find whatever he left behind. We are finishing this." 3 things happened in the next 72 hours that changed everything. The first was Sabrina Vale making a mistake. For 8 months, Sabrina had been feeding confidential Meridian board strategy to her ex-boyfriend, Marcus Webb, who worked for Hargrove Capital, a rival corporation attempting a hostile takeover. The arrangement was simple. Marcus gave Sabrina cash payments routed through a fake consulting company. Sabrina gave Marcus documents she accessed through Nathan's unlocked laptop. Everyone profited. No one got caught. Until Marcus sent a text meant for Sabrina to the wrong number. The text contained details about an upcoming board vote and the words, "S sent the proxy docs. Hargrove is ready to move on Tuesday. Tell legal to prep the tender offer." The text went to the personal phone of a Meridian board member's executive assistant. The assistant forwarded it to compliance. Compliance forwarded it to the FBI. Within 24 hours, a full forensic audit of Sabrina's corporate communications was underway. They found everything: the affair evidence, the insider trading, the leaked documents, and a series of texts between Sabrina and Marcus that made it clear Nathan was not Sabrina's love interest. He was her access point. Sabrina had never cared about Nathan. She had cared about his laptop password. The second thing that happened was Leonard Shaw opening his eyes. After 3.5 weeks in a medically induced coma, Leonard woke up on a Wednesday morning. His left side was still partially paralyzed. His speech was slow. His handwriting was illegible. But his mind was intact, sharp and furious, and completely aware of how much time had been lost. His first words to his nurse were, "I need to speak with Evelyn Carter. It is a matter of $40 billion. His second instruction was to his junior associate, a young attorney named David, who had been holding down the office. He said, "There is a digital vault, fireproof server in the basement. Passcode is Ruth's birthday, backward. Inside you will find authenticated trust documents, a video testimony I recorded 6 months ago for exactly this situation, and a sealed letter from Evelyn's grandmother. Bring everything to the hospital. Now. By Wednesday evening, Leonard was propped up in his hospital bed with Evelyn beside him, reviewing documents on a tablet propped on a meal tray. He looked terrible. He sounded like he was speaking through gravel. But his eyes were clear. He said, "I apologize for the delay." Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "Leonard, you had a stroke." He said, "Poor planning on my part. It will not happen again." She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back with the one hand that still worked. The third thing that happened was Maggie Torres delivering a recording to Marjorie Kent. Marjorie listened to Nathan and Diane's kitchen conversation twice. Then she removed her glasses, set them on the table, and said, "Well, I believe we have sufficient grounds for an emergency board session. The corporate espionage alone would justify it. But this," she tapped the phone, "this is why we have bylaws about conflicts of interest." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 10 in the morning. Leonard's video testimony and authenticated trust documents were submitted to the board secretary on Thursday at 4 in the afternoon. Marjorie confirmed quorum by Thursday at 8 in the evening. Evelyn spent Thursday night in her studio apartment. She did not sleep. She sat in the rocking chair she had reclaimed from Nathan's apartment, the same chair she had bought for the nursery, and she rocked slowly back and forth with her hands on her belly. Maggie called at midnight. She said, "How are you feeling?" Evelyn said, terrified. Maggie said, "Good. That means it matters. Now go put your feet up and drink some water. You are about to own a Fortune 500 company, and you need to be hydrated for that." Evelyn smiled. She said, "It is not a Fortune 500 company." Maggie said, "Well, whatever number it is, drink water." On Friday morning at 9:45, Evelyn Carter walked into the 42nd floor boardroom of Meridian Holdings. She was 8.5 months pregnant. She was wearing a simple blue dress. Her hair was pulled back. She had no entourage, no bodyguards, no dramatic entrance. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had been through hell and was still standing. Leonard arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by his junior associate David. He was pale. He was thin. He was wearing a suit jacket over his hospital gown because, as he told the nurse, there are standards. Marjorie Kent called the session to order at 10:05. 6 of 7 board members were present. The 7th had provided a proxy vote. Quorum was confirmed. Leonard's video testimony played first. On screen, recorded 6 months earlier, Leonard explained the trust structure, authenticated the documents, and confirmed Evelyn's identity as the sole beneficiary and rightful chairwoman of Meridian Holdings. His voice on the recording was strong, clear, and meticulous. In the wheelchair, he watched himself with something between pride and relief. The vote was unanimous. At 10:18 in the morning, Evelyn Harper Carter was formally installed as chairwoman and controlling shareholder of Meridian Holdings. Marjorie turned to her. She said, "Congratulations, chairwoman. What is your first directive?" Evelyn took a breath. She said, "Schedule an all-company address for this afternoon, 2 o'clock. Tell them it is a culture and values announcement. Do not mention my name." By 1:45, the main auditorium at Meridian headquarters was full. 600 employees, including every executive, every vice president, and every department head, seated in rows of blue chairs under industrial lighting. A podium stood at the front with the Meridian logo projected behind it. Nathan Cole sat in the 4th row. He was checking his phone. He assumed this was a routine corporate communication, the kind of thing that interrupted his actual work. He was annoyed. At exactly 2 o'clock, the lights dimmed slightly. The Meridian logo on the screen dissolved. It was replaced by a silver corporate seal and the words, Office of the Chairwoman. Nathan looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed. Evelyn walked onto the stage. The room went silent, not gradually, instantly. 600 people recognized the pregnant woman from the gala footage that had been circulating for months and could not reconcile her presence behind a podium with a corporate title on the screen behind her. Nathan's phone slipped from his fingers and clattered on the floor. He did not pick it up. Evelyn adjusted the microphone. She said, "Good afternoon. My name is Evelyn Harper Carter. As of 10:18 this morning, I am the chairwoman and majority shareholder of Meridian Holdings. I have held the controlling interest in this company for over a year through a trust established by my late grandmother, Ruth Carter, who founded this company in 1978. A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Nathan gripped the armrests of his chair. Evelyn continued. She said, I did not plan to introduce myself this way. I planned to do it quietly, professionally, in the boardroom. But 6 months ago, something happened at our foundation gala that changed my plans. And I believe you deserve to see it. She turned to the screen. The footage began. 400 guests, crystal chandeliers, Diane throwing wine. Sabrina's slap, the sound sharp and real, amplified through the auditorium speakers. And Nathan's laugh. That one short, cruel laugh that had followed Evelyn into every nightmare for 6 months. 600 people watched in silence. Some covered their mouths. Some looked away. Several looked directly at Nathan, who had sunk so far into his chair, he seemed to be trying to disappear into the upholstery. The footage ended. Evelyn faced the room. She said, The man in that video is my husband, was my husband. I was 7 months pregnant when this happened. I was hospitalized that night. I nearly lost my baby. She paused. Then she said, I am not showing you this for revenge. I am showing you this so you understand something about the company you work for. Meridian will never tolerate what happened to me happening to anyone else. Not at our events, not in our offices, not in our culture. She straightened. She said, effective immediately. The following actions have been authorized by the board. Nathan Cole is terminated for cause. Conduct violations, collusion with external parties through a compromised consultant, and misrepresentation of professional credentials. His stock options are voided. His access is revoked. Security appeared at the end of Nathan's row. 2 officers, professional, calm, waiting. Nathan stood. His face was white. He said, Evelyn, wait. Let me explain. Evelyn did not look at him. She continued. Sabrina Vale's consulting contract is terminated. Additionally, federal authorities have been notified regarding corporate espionage conducted through Ms. Vale's access. She is being taken into custody today. In the back of the auditorium, 2 FBI agents had entered quietly. They were not there for the speech. They were there for Sabrina, who was not in the room because she had been arrested at her apartment 45 minutes earlier. She had answered the door in a silk robe and been led to a federal vehicle in handcuffs while her neighbors watched. Marcus Webb had been arrested that morning in New York. Evelyn said, Diane Cole is banned from all Meridian properties and events. A referral has been made to the state attorney regarding a false affidavit filed during custody proceedings. She paused one final time. She said, I am not going to stand up here and tell you that what I went through made me stronger. That is what people say when they want suffering to have a nice ending. What I will tell you is that I survived it. And this company is going to be better because I did. She stepped back from the podium. The auditorium was silent for 3 full seconds. Then applause began. Hesitant at first, then louder, then overwhelming. 600 people standing, clapping, some of them crying, filling the room with the sound of something Nathan Cole had wanted his entire career and lost in a single laugh. Nathan stood motionless in the fourth row, while security waited patiently at the end of his aisle. He looked at the stage where his pregnant wife, the woman he had dismissed and mocked and replaced, stood in a simple blue dress with a company worth $40 billion behind her name. He picked up his phone from the floor. He walked to the end of the row. He did not look back. Security escorted him to the lobby, where a box of his personal effects was waiting on the front desk. His name badge had already been deactivated. His parking spot had already been reassigned. His corner office was being cleared by facilities staff who worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had seen this before. Outside the building, Nathan stood on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard box and squinting in the afternoon sun. He looked up at the 42nd floor. The windows reflected nothing back. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in June, Evelyn Carter sat in her office on the 42nd floor of Meridian Holdings. Lake Michigan stretched out beyond the glass, flat and silver, under an overcast sky. A bassinet stood beside her desk. Inside, her daughter slept with the aggressive commitment to unconsciousness that only newborns possess. Her name was Margaret Ruth Carter. Margaret, after Maggie. Ruth after the grandmother who built an empire and hid it so her granddaughter could find her own strength. Maggie had cried when Evelyn told her the name. Then she had said, "You named her after me. I am going to be insufferable now." Evelyn had said, "You already were." The divorce was finalized. Evelyn had not pursued personal damages. Her attorney, Monica, had questioned this. She had said, "Given the footage, the public assault, the emotional harm, you have grounds for a significant claim." Evelyn had signed the final papers and said, "I want freedom, not a decade of theatrical litigation." The trust assets had never been marital property. Nathan received nothing from the company. Full custody went to Evelyn. The judge, reviewing the complete evidence, including Maggie's recording of Nathan and Diane's kitchen conversation, had not deliberated long. Today was the day Evelyn had been preparing for quietly. At 11 in the morning, in the Meridian Foundation auditorium, she would announce the Ruth Carter Foundation. $200 million in initial funding. Emergency housing for pregnant women fleeing domestic abuse. Legal aid for mothers navigating custody threats. Medical partnerships for high-risk pregnancies. Financial literacy programs. Child care grants. A 24-hour crisis hotline. Not a vanity project. Not a press opportunity. A system built to catch the women who fall through every other system. Evelyn reviewed her notes one more time. Leonard Shaw sat across from her in a regular chair now, not a wheelchair. Though he still walked with a cane, and his left hand trembled when he was tired. He came to the office once a week. They did not always talk business. Sometimes they talked about Ruth, about Kentucky, about pie. Leonard said, "Your grandmother would be proud of you." Evelyn looked up. She said, "I hope so." Leonard said, "I know so. She told me once that the measure of a person is not what they do when they have power. It is what they do when they have power, and every reason to use it cruelly, and they choose not to." At 11:05, Evelyn took the stage. The auditorium was full. Staff, board members, donors, press, community leaders, and in the third row, invited personally, 47 women from shelters across Chicago. Some held children. Some held each other's hands. All of them watched. Evelyn spoke without notes. She said, "When people ask what leadership is, they usually describe status, or control, or attention. I do not define it that way. Leadership is what you do when you have been publicly wounded and still choose not to multiply harm. She paused. She said, 6 months ago, I experienced something no pregnant woman should experience. Humiliation, violence, betrayal, in a room that should have been safe. I could spend today naming names. I will not. I am interested in outcomes, not performances. Behind her, the screen displayed concrete programs, partner hospitals, hotline numbers, grant timelines, legal aid directories, not slogans, systems. She said, the Ruth Carter Foundation exists because my grandmother believed that strength is not about surviving alone. It is about making sure the next woman does not have to. If you are in this room and you are going through something similar, or if you know someone who is, here is what I want you to know. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not alone. And your story is not over. In the third row, a young woman stood up. She was maybe 25, visibly pregnant. Tears streaming down her face, she said, I am going through what you went through. I thought I was alone. Evelyn stepped off the stage. She walked down the center aisle. She reached the young woman and took her hands. She said, you are not alone, and you never will be again. The applause that followed was not the polished, obligatory kind that fills corporate events. It was messy and loud and came from a place that corporate events rarely reach. In the weeks that followed, the foundation received 14,000 applications in its first month. 92% of emergency housing requests were fulfilled within 72 hours. The crisis hotline averaged 400 calls per day. 3 state legislators cited the foundation when introducing expanded protections for pregnant women in abusive households. And in the lives of the people who had once stood in that ballroom and laughed, things settled into their earned conclusions. Nathan Cole took a mid-level consulting position at a firm most people had never heard of. He rented a studio apartment on the north side of Chicago. He saw his daughter on supervised visits every other Saturday. He was quiet during those visits. Sometimes he read to her, sometimes he just held her. Whether this was growth or performance, only time would tell. One morning, he passed a newsstand and saw Evelyn on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, "The Quiet Billionaire Who Built a Safety Net." He bought the magazine. He read it alone at his kitchen table. He did not call. Sabrina Vale pleaded guilty to 3 counts of corporate espionage and 1 count of securities fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Her social media accounts were deleted. Her consulting clients were gone. Marcus Webb received 6 years. Their story ended not with drama, but with paperwork, which is how most stories about greed actually end. Diane Cole moved to a small town in coastal Florida. She joined a garden club and a book group and told everyone she met that her son was a successful executive in Chicago. She called Nathan once a week. He picked up about half the time. She never mentioned Evelyn. She never mentioned the gala. She lived inside a version of events that required constant maintenance and no witnesses. Leonard Shaw retired officially, but never completely. He came to Evelyn's office every other Thursday for tea. They talked about Ruth. They talked about Kentucky. They talked about how a woman who drove a 12-year-old pickup truck had somehow built something that would outlast all of them. Leonard's hand still trembled. His mind did not. Maggie Torres was promoted to head nurse at Northwestern Memorial. She was still loud. She still had zero filter. She still called Evelyn every single night. When baby Margaret said her first word, which was not mama, but something closer to ma that Maggie insisted was short for Maggie, they argued about it for 2 weeks. It was the best argument either of them had ever had. On a Thursday evening in September, Evelyn sat in her apartment after putting Margaret to bed. The city glowed outside the windows. The apartment was quiet, in the particular way that only happens when a baby has finally surrendered to sleep, and the whole world holds its breath in solidarity. Evelyn opened the drawer of her desk and pulled out a brown paper bag, flattened, creased, old. The bag that had once held a turkey and avocado sandwich she had brought to surprise her husband on the day she watched him kiss another woman through a windshield. She had kept it for 6 months, first as evidence, then as a reminder, then for a while as a wound she could not stop pressing. She looked at it for a long time. Then she smiled faintly, the way you smile at something that used to control you and does not anymore. She threw it into the trash. She poured a glass of water. She checked the baby monitor. She opened her laptop and reviewed the next quarter's foundation budget because there were 400 women on a waiting list, and she intended to get that number to 0. Outside, Chicago carried on, indifferent and bright, the way cities do when they are full of people building things and breaking things, and occasionally, if they are lucky, finding the strength to start over. Evelyn Carter did not become powerful because she inherited a company. She became powerful because when the whole world told her she was nothing, she refused to believe them, and that is something no one can take away. If anything in this story felt familiar, if you are dealing with emotional abuse, financial control, isolation, or someone who makes you feel small, you are not alone. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. Available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You deserve safety, you deserve respect, and your story is not over. Final disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our creative team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character is fictional, but every emotion is real. Our goal is not just to entertain, but to inspire awareness, empathy, and strength in anyone who needs it. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next story.